Aloha mai kākou. My name is Walter Kawaiaiea, your host for Ukulele Songs of Hawaii. Today's episode is titled 40 Years of Territorial Airwaves. And joining me today is my special guest, the mastermind behind 40 Years of Territorial Airwaves, the albino blala Hawaiian himself. How about a warm welcome for Mr. Harry B. Soria Jr. Aloha and welcome, Harry B.
Hi, Walter. It's great to be here. First time.
Good to have you, and big mahalo for taking the time out of your very busy and hectic schedule to join me here at Ukulele Songs of Hawaii. So, Harry, 2019 marks 40 years.
It does. Luckily, I was just a child when we started.
Oh, just a child,
yeah,
I see.
Yeah.
But you still look good, Harry.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, how did all this get started for you?
Well, I was listening to KCCN 1420 AM radio, Honolulu Skylark. I was really enjoying her midday show. And I was working in an office in the Bishop Trust building, which is now right across from Pioneer Plaza. And they had just moved from Waikiki to Pioneer Plaza in '78. So I started winning trivia contests, and then she started interviewing me. And then, because I always knew the answer to every vintage trivia question she was asking, because I would just call up my father, say, Dad, they're asking this question, what's the answer?
Cheating, I see.
Well, you know, he was in his 80s, and so, I always won. And so we started the show on June 13th, 1979, and we just continued to go. And technologically, we kept changing because, I know this show is about technology as well. We started bringing the actual 78 RPM records in, placing them on the turntable, changing the needles and the speeds, and playing those records live over the radio. Because in those days, KCCN played 33 and 45 RPM records on the turntables with the 33 needles. So I brought in 78 RPMs from the 30s and 40s, and the show just took off because people hadn't heard that music except the old timers who wanted to hear that music again. So
I guess we could say 40 years ago, and even as you've moved through the generations of time, this music is being introduced like right now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of young people out there that would be hearing this kind of music for the first time.
Well, a quick way to answer that is when I started, we did interviews, and then after 7 years, Keomiki Akui came in and Skylark went off to the Big Island, and we were asked, what's going to happen to Territorial Airways when its listeners pass away? And because so many of them were elderly. And Keomiki said, gee, I don't know what's going to happen, when they're gone, what are we going to do? But what in reality happened is now we have an entire generation of people who were born after we started the show. They're in their 20s and 30s, and they're our biggest fans.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We have Raiatea Helm put a Territorial Airways generated song on her latest CD. The falsetto trio Nahoa. Oh, yes. They put a song. They took a song from Territorial Airways and put it on their latest CD. So we're having that effect that we had with the brothers Casimiro and Peter Moon a generation ago. They were using music they heard on Territorial Airways and rehashing it.
So I guess it would be very appropriate to say that Territorial Airwaves has stepped into the educational realm, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, when you mention names like Raiatea and Nahoa, I know we all know these people and their age. So they without Territorial Airwaves, that generation would be clueless to the sounds of the territory.
And back in the day, we just broadcast on AM radio, which was Honolulu, Oahu, some places that couldn't get reception. And then we would go to part of Kauai, straight line across the water. But other than that, for 20 years, that's my audience. And then suddenly the internet comes up and we start doing podcasts. I now have on my website 7 years and counting of weekly shows in a podcast on-demand form. And so my wife and I went to Paris. We go every year. And this year we flew to Rome to see some dancers she's influenced there. And they throw a party for us, a reception, and they hire a band in Rome that plays Hawaiian music. So they're so excited, and we finally meet them on the break, and they said, oh, we've learned everything, including our steel guitar and our Hapaholi songs, from listening to territorialairwaves.com. That's in Rome, Italy.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So how were they getting that? I mean, were you broadcasting, at what point in time would people be able to pick through the podcast, I'm assuming, that they would be able to pick this up?
It's actually, we're using on-demand technology. Okay. So on our website, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they can go in, look up a show or an artist that they're interested in, click on it, and they'll start it no matter what time or place they're at. It is on demand.
So technology has really helped you to expand the viewership.
We now, our metrics tell us that we have more listeners in our 40th year than we've had in Hawaiian Islands.
Really?
Yeah, in terrestrial radio. Yeah.
Wow. Now, you mentioned something earlier that in the early days of Territorial Airwaves, you were just on the AM side.
Yes.
So that limited the broadcast just within the state of Hawaii.
Right.
Particularly to the neighbor islands. At what point did Territorial Airwaves go FM and making it capable for the neighbor islands to pick up?
Good question. That was in the 20th year, and we went to Hawaiian 105 Kawaiaiea FM, 105.1, and suddenly we could be heard on Maui, parts of the Big Island, as well as Kauai and so forth. So we had different coverage. It was a little wider. But again, the breakthrough was when, in the early 2000s, we started streaming. So I had people that were listening live at midnight for the 5 to 6 p.m. afternoon Sundays show from here. From Honolulu is 5 to 6 p.m., but in New York City, it was 11 to midnight.
Right.
And they would stay up on a Sunday night and have to work the next morning because they had to get their fix of Territorial Airwaves.
Soria.
And then I think the podcast concept came up about 2006. We started doing on-demand shows.
The technological advancements that we've experienced over the last 20 years has really helped to push things forward with this kind of music and what you're doing.
Oh yeah, my dad used to say, Harry, in the 80s, he would say, my show in the 1930s, Voice of Hawaii, was on KGU and NBC, and we would be broadcasting to NBC nationwide, the continental United States and Canada. You need to do that. Can't you hook up with shortwave? I said, well, Dad, they really don't have shortwave available anymore, but I'll keep looking. And then he died in 1990, and not long after that, the internet started. That became available, I should say.
It's too bad Dad couldn't have been here
to
witness
he missed that.
But speaking of Dad, I want to diverse for a little bit and have you tell our viewership a little bit about obviously you have DNA.
Yep.
When it comes to radio.
Yep.
And does it only go back to Dad, or does it go further back than that?
Goes back to Grandpa.
So maybe we can have our engineers throw up picture number one. I think
there's Grandpa
that's
right there.
Grandpa right there.
Yeah, Harry Gilman Soria, Harry G. Soria. And he became the first radio solicitor in Honolulu with the first radio station, KGU. And he started in the late 20s, early 30s, and he was the right-hand man to Marion Mulroney, who owned and operated KGU. And they were in the Advertiser building that is now Hawaiian Dredging, I think, is in there.
Yes.
And that beautiful building. So they were on the third floor, the entire third floor, and KGU was the biggest and first radio station and very dominant in Honolulu. So grandfather was doing that, and then Dad got the bug, and he was, of course, a young man. And so what he did is he got a fake name, Hal Browning. There he is.
That's Dad.
Yeah, and he's broadcasting at KGU there, but when he first started, he was Hal Browning on KGMB, the smaller station, and he basically became so famous that his father said, hey, you got to come over to my station, I'll market you. So he brought him over, and he started making shows like Going to Town with Harry B. Soria. And, all these things. So suddenly Dad was a radio personality before there were radio personalities in Honolulu.
I'll say, so grandfather, Harry G. Soria, was not a broadcast personality.
No, he was sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing.
Yeah, he sold what they call time, which is, if a laundry or toothpaste company wanted to sponsor a show, he would sell them, and you'd hear, this is so-and-so tooth powder hour,
So was he kind of the pioneer in Hawaii with regards to soliciting advertising time?
He was the biggest salesperson at that time for advertising. There was only 2 stations, and because he was Kawaiaiea, he got all the big accounts, and he knew all these people. So, and so he set his son up to be a personality. He was basically selling time using his son as creating this radio star.
Well, I want our viewership to hear some of the music, so I'm going to ask our engineers if they could put up that first song, and we'll hear for about a minute or so, My Wahine and Me. And I'm going to guess. I want to see if our viewership can guess the voice on this. So
that's so obscure. I don't think anybody's alive today that'll
anybody
remember.
alive today. So if we can get that song up, it's called My Wahine and Me.
This tropical oil has done its work well. We paused for a while, and under its spell, I fell for her, she fell for me. Now we're part of the scenery. Wherever you go in the islands, wherever you happen to be, the chances are that you won't be far from my wahine and me. We're roaming around in the highlands, we're walking along by the sea. We're here, we're there, oh, we're everywhere, my wahine and me. Don't know whether this was meant, only know it's nice. Here together we're content in our Hawaiian paradise, riding along on a surfboard or under a coconut tree. We're satisfied to be side by side, for I love her and she goes for me, my wahine and me.
Oh, that really, when you hear that kind of music, it just takes you back to a bygone era, literally. Yep. And it's so indicative of the time. So I thought, does Don McDermott Sr. have anything to do with that?
Well, he was leading the orchestra. He was leading the band, and he was playing clarinet.
See.
And the singer was Gil Mershon, a tenor that was very popular in Hawaii at the time. And the records were made basically in the 1940s, about 46. And the scheme was that they would make records that would be available for hula dancers. So they made the company, the label, for 78 RPM records as hula. And then as 20 years went by, suddenly, or actually more like 15 years, his son, Don Jr., made a company that put out 33 1/3 and called it Hula Records, the same company. And then grandson, Flip, he continued that Hula Records.
Gosh. So, but you and Flip, we're all about the same age, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a generation gap because you mentioned earlier that you were close with Flip's father.
Well, my father was pals with Don McDermott I, who made this recording. And then he had a son, Don Jr., who later did the Hula Records 33s. But the guy who's closest to my age is Flip, or Don III.
Don III.
And so there was a generation skip because my father and I were just 2 generations, but the McDermotts were 3 generations. and that is because when I was born, the firstborn, my father was 43 and my mother was 24.
I see. Okay, so
we
got a lot of stories, and I got a lot of questions to ask Harry, but we're going to take a break, about a 60-minute break, and we'll be back with Ukulele Songs of Hawaii and our guest, Mr. Harry B. Soria Jr., 40 years of Territorial Airwaves.
Hi, I'm Rusty Komori, host of Beyond the Lines on ThinkTech Hawaii. My show is based on my book, also titled Beyond the Lines, and it's about creating a superior culture of excellence, leadership, and finding greatness. I interview guests who are successful in business, sports, and life, which is sure to inspire you in finding your greatness. Join me every Monday as we go Beyond the Lines at 11 a.m. Aloha.
Hey, aloha. My name is Andrew Lanning. I'm the host of Security Matters Hawaii, airing every Wednesday here on ThinkTech Hawaii, live from the studios. I'll bring you guests. I'll bring you information about the things in security that matter to keeping you safe, your coworkers safe, your family safe, to keep our community safe. We want to teach you about those things in our industry that, may be a little outside of your experience. So please join me, because security matters. Aloha.
Aloha and welcome back. Just before the break, Harry was giving us background. Let me see if I got this right. Your dad was 43 and mom was 24 when they had you, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, see, yeah. I do remember.
Yeah, so by the time I started Territorial Airwaves in '79, I was 29, and Jacqueline Rossetti Lindsay was 24. So we were kids playing 78 RPMs. It was totally obscure and new to her, but I had my father as my technical consultant, and he was old enough to be my grandfather, so he could answer any trivia question of the old because he had worked in radio and music, and he knew all the musicians from those days.
Wow.
So
it just fell into your hands, literally.
It did.
I mean, I've heard, over the years that Harry has this vast collection of 78s. I mean, just how extensive is it, if you don't mind my asking?
No, I don't. We have over 10,000 Hawaiian records.
10,000?
10,000. In my home up in Manoa, we have 2 large shelves with what we call the working collection. Half is 78 RPM, and the other half is 33 1/3. And the 45s are in storage, and the rest of all the records are there as well. But we have thousands right there in the living room.
Oh, in the recording business, so we 78s come before 45s, is that correct?
That's right.
So we went from 78s, and then the industry went to 45s.
Yes.
And then from 45s, we went to 33 1/3
yes,
LPs,
that's
long playing
approximately how it went. Yeah.
How it went.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember growing up as a kid in our own home. I mean, a lot of 45s, a lot of LPs.
Yeah.
But mom and them had 70. I have to tell you this story because you're going to appreciate this. So Harry knows my association with the legend Kahau on the lake.
Right.
And in my younger days, this is when George and I were going for lessons one day. Kahau Anu, the original Lake Trio, recorded on a 78.
Yes.
And it was so one side I think it was Nani Venusi, and the other side I can't remember the song. Pulilia. Well, see, Harry's got the memory. That's why he's in the business. Anyway, so after that Saturday morning's lesson, he gives me the 78 with my ukulele, and George and I decided to go surfing down at Sandy's.
Oh, boy.
And guess what I did?
Left it in the sun.
I left my ukulele as well as the 78 in my trunk. I mean, I was only 15, 16 years old, Harry.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. Well, can you imagine what I found, 6 hours later when we were through swimming and surfing?
A warped record.
A warped. It was literally like a flower, just
Yep.
the vinyl. And my ukulele, the bridge had ripped right off.
Oh.
Yes, and well, anyway, that's a show. That's a show.
Yeah.
Another day, we'll finish that
Yes.
story. I got a couple of questions I want to ask.
Sure.
I mean, your background with your grandfather and your father. You got the marketing side of radio. You've got the collection from your father and his experience as a personality on radio back in the territorial days. How would you say, if I ask you a question, how were you influenced by grandfather and father in the work that you do now?
Well, grandfather became a 33rd degree Mason, which there's very few. Kalakaua was one as well. And one of the biggest things about them is they do these memorizations and oratory.
Oh.
They give these speeches, and if they become proficient enough, they elevate 32nd, 33rd, and so forth. These degrees. Well, that was grandfather. He was very good speech maker. And then dad got into radio, and he was very good as he could be doing remote broadcasts, and he got a lot of hats at KGU. He was very proficient, and he was also very good in following in the Masonic Temple. Well, when I was between 8 and 10 years old, I started listening to my transistor radio, and I got fascinated by radio and the fact that I could go with Dad to the stations that he was connected with in the 1950s. So he bought me a tape recorder. Well, he brought a used tape recorder home, actually, and it was a desktop, and he showed me how to operate it. I'm not even 10 years old yet. And he says, okay, this is how you do it. This is the mic. You go ahead and make radio shows, make adventure shows, and do the sound effects, and I'll listen to each one you make. So I would do it. Sometimes my friends would help me. He'd listen to it and critique me. And he told me later that no son of mine is going to have mic fright. He wanted me to get so used to the sound of my own voice that I wouldn't be intimidated by a microphone. That influenced me because I started, being in the talent contest, in the singing in the school events, in elementary school.
You became the MC.
No, I was more of appearing with my friend and singing songs.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you like to sing for us now, Harry?
No, not at all. and then eventually, after high school, I got in a blues rock band, and we joined the Musicians Union. We played all the big halls, in HIC, NBC, Waikiki Shell, all this stuff. And we went all the way through that freshman year at UH until the end. And then we all decided to go to the mainland and continue our education up there. And so the group just broke up.
Oh, my gosh.
But we had a year, and so I had a lot of mic, and at that time I was the MC as well as the lead singer.
I didn't know you sang, Harry.
I know, I'll show you a picture sometime.
I got to see that.
And then when I came back, I got jobs, and I'm doing my thing. And then in '79, which was just basically 10 years after I was a lead singer, suddenly I was swept into radio, where I've been ever since.
Well, thank goodness you were swept into radio for all of us and for all of Hawaii. We could sit here and talk all day with Harry. You're a wealth of information, but I want our engineers to cue up this song from our second half music collection. And this one is by Andy Cummings.
Ah.
And, my wife and I were very close to Andy.
Yes.
To get my position at Hawaiian Airlines back in 1971.
That's right.
I had to be interviewed for the sales job, then I had to come back the next day and play in front of Andy, who ran the promotion team.
Yeah.
So if our engineers can cue up that song, Waikiki,
His signature tune.
his signature tune.
Yeah. Yeah, he was quite a guy, wasn't he?
Oh.
There's a feeling deep in my heart, stabbing at me just like a dart. It's a feeling heavenly. I see memories out of the past, memories that always will last, all that place across the sea. Waikiki, at night when the shadows are falling, I hear your rolling surf calling, calling and calling to me. Waikiki, 'tis for you that my heart is yearning. My thoughts are always returning out there to you, across the sea. Your tropic nights and your wonderful charms are ever in my memory. And I recall when I held in my arms an angel sweet and heavenly. My whole life is empty without you. I miss that magic about you, magic beside the sea.
Wow, boy, that sure brings back memories when you hear voices like that, Mr. Andy Cummings, and the influence that he had on Hapahali music.
Oh, yeah.
He was, I had, like I said earlier, I had a chance to play music with him on tour at Hawaiian Airlines, and he was a musician.
He was amazing.
He was amazing.
When I had him on Territorial Airwaves, I mentioned my father's story that he had told me that he had made up jingles on the spot for hot point appliances, and they would drive around the island on the back of a pickup truck, a flatbed truck, go into Haleiwa, and Andy would sing these songs he just made up. So 40 years later, I interview him on Territorial Airways, and I mention the story. He sings the whole jingle. He had a photographic memory. He just made up that for the day, and he still remembered the whole song.
Yeah. And he used to do that for companies all across the globe.
Oh, yeah.
For Hawaiian Airlines.
Yeah. And he never forgot a song.
He never forgot the jingles.
Yeah.
He never forgot them. I got to ask you, and so 40 years of Territorial Airwaves, and tell our viewers about a big gala event that's coming up next month. And
that's Friday, June 14th at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel Monarch Room. We have all kinds of artists, Raiatea Helm, Nahoa, Ho'okena, Alan Kaka and his Islanders, and Kimo Keolana and his Lehulu. And it's going to be a sumptuous buffet dinner, a wonderful evening, silent auction of vintage Hawaiian items, and it's all for our nonprofit that now owns my collection, which is called Hawaiian Music Archives Foundation.
So tell our viewers, for those that are interested, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this that would like to, how do they get tickets to go to this event?
Good question. Go to territorialairwaves.com and click on the red tickets button.
Okay, you got that. Territorialairwaves.com and the red ticket button. Well, Harry, thank you so much for taking the time out and being with us and sharing such a wealth of information back in the territory.
Yeah.
And we qualify. We're territory babies, aren't we?
Oh, I'm over the hill. I'm 70.
Oh, you're 70. Okay, yeah, you are older than me. So, yes, Uncle. Thanks for taking the time, Harry. And big mahalo for all of our viewers out there. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with more from Ukulele Songs of Hawaii. I'm your host, Walter Kawaiaiea. And for now, aloha no.